The Disney classic Pinocchio is a unique film with the Disney pantheon due to it having multiple main villains, but also by not having any of them face the consequences of their actions. Even though Pinocchio escapes, Stromboli is able to continue his on-the-road puppet show. Honest John and his quirky cat sidekick made off with a ton of money after selling Pinocchio to the coachman, and the coachman continues to kidnap boys to turn them into donkeys and sell them into slavery. The worst one of them all has to be the Blue Fairy, who doesn't even get portrayed as the villain she is simply because she's pretty. Now, you may be thinking, I thought the fairy was good because she gave Pinocchio life and also saved him from the clutches of Stromboli. And while that is true, if you take a look at her role within the story of Pinocchio as a whole, you'll come to see her actions more resemble that of a bored god toying with humanity than the benevolent and protective figure they try to paint her as. To start, what all do we know about the Blue Fairy? We know that she's capable of creating life, we know that she resides within the wishing star in the sky and grants the wishes of those she deems worthy, and we know she has a peculiar relationship to children. I say this because instead of granting the wish of Geppetto outright, she fulfills his contract halfway, turning Pinocchio into a living puppet that has to prove he deserves to be human by meeting 3 arbitrary requirements that she sets. She also has a moment when freeing Pinocchio from the clutches of Stromboli where she states that a boy who won't be good might as well be made of wood, showing that she doesn't like children, particularly those she considers unworthy. That quote reminds me of what the coachman says when he brings the boys to Pleasure Island.
Give a bad boy enough rope and he'll soon make a jackass of himself.
Very interesting that the 2 characters known for transforming young boys would also use similar quotes in this movie. It's almost as if they're connected in some way. Now that we're here, have you ever thought about how the coachman transforms the boys into donkeys? He appears to be a regular guy with no special abilities. He travels by horse and carriage, he uses money to further his goals. He doesn't even have the power to transform the boys himself because when he goes to check Alexander and the rest of the transformed donkey boys, he doesn't just transform them fully himself. He sends them back to Pleasure Island to finish transforming into donkeys. This lets us know that the power to transform them resides in the island. But how did he figure that out? Treasure Island seems to be known at least by the lowlives and police.
Island. Pleasure Island. But the law.
But how did it get its reputation? It's not something you just stumble upon while walking in the woods one day. You have to actively seek it out by going on a small journey on a boat. And even then, you wouldn't know that it transforms boys, let alone misbehaving boys, without strenuous trial and error. So how did he figure all this out? Maybe he didn't have to figure it out. Maybe the one who created the island and cursed it for him told him how the island works and supplied him with the necessary tools to tempt young boys into misbehaving so that they'd be punished. I mean, look at this place. It would honestly take years and an entire crew to build the structures here, considering the time period this takes place in. And to have to rebuild each time he brings a batch of misbehaving boys there would be even more time spent, unless it all magically fixes itself. And we already discussed that he's just a regular guy, so how's he doing all this? What if he has a partner, or someone that had magic power to supply him with these tools? Who do we know with that kind of power? The power to transform boys and also to rebuild his island each time it's destroyed. Well, how about the Blue Fairy? We know that she's capable of turning a donkey boy into a human, so she should be capable of doing the opposite. And I already explained her disdain for misbehaving children, so wouldn't it make sense that she created this island for the sole purpose of punishing children? And then after creating this island, tasked the coachman, an individual equally as depraved as herself, to lure misbehaving boys to the island to transform them into donkeys? Surely she knows about the island because I'm positive there'd be plenty of donkey boys wishing to be reunited with their families and to be transformed back into humans. Even if they don't wish on a proper star and say the right words, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They have parents, maybe even a family, and no matter how bad they are, I'm sure their families would notice them not being there. So what about the families? I'm positive the families are saying the right words and wishing on a proper star for their misguided child to return home to them safely, or at the very least to know where they are. So why are these wishes being ignored? Could it be the fairy thinks these boys deserve their fate and doesn't answer the cries for help because she's already passed judgment? It's possible. Could it also be due to the fact that the fairy is bored and does this for her entertainment? That could explain why she lets Pinocchio get into the predicaments he finds himself in, knowing that he's naive and impressionable due to having just been created. And sure, she helps him out, but only to a certain degree. She doesn't tell Geppetto where Pinocchio is when he goes missing. She also doesn't warn Pinocchio about Pleasure Island and what goes on there. And when Pinocchio goes to rescue Geppetto, instead of helping him out, she essentially sends him to his death by having him face off against the deadly whale monster. So, what have we learned? The Blue Fairy, the cosmic deity that resides within the wishing star, grants the wishes of those that can entertain her by completing arbitrary goals, all the while simultaneously punishing and ignoring those she considers to be undeserving. This is why I called her the biggest bad in the movie, and why to this day, Pinocchio remains one of, if not the darkest film in Pixar history.